Welcome to Occult Archives. You know, the show where we deep dive into all the mysteries and myths and legends behind history's most, well, let's say, talked about books. No everyday news here. Today, we're going deep into a text that's both fascinating and, I'd say, a bit notorious. The Apocalypse of Freemasonry by F.D.P. Castells.
Yeah, episode 225 for those keeping score at home.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not here to debunk, or for that matter, to confirm any of the wilder theories out there. We're here because you, the listeners, shared this book, this source, because you want to understand what it says about Freemasonry at a deeper level. What are its core ideas, especially about the symbols and the philosophy behind them? It's like exploring a whole hidden intellectual world.
I like that, a hidden landscape. So how do we even start to unpack all of this?
Well, Castells focuses a lot on light and darkness, how important that is. Then there's the lodge itself, like its design, where it's placed, how it's put together. And of course, the whole journey of initiation. He really believes those are the keys to understanding what Freemasonry, at least as he sees it, is truly about.
Right, and it's Castells' interpretation, right? He's drawing these connections between how things were done historically, the philosophical ideas, and then how those show up in the actual rituals of Freemasonry.
Exactly.
So right off the bat, the book says early writers on Freemasonry, they basically thought LUX, which is Latin for light, was almost like the whole point, the whole science of Freemasonry.
Yeah, and he even brings up that circle, divided into four parts, making a cross. And in that cross, you can see the letters LVX, and it makes those four right angles like a square, which every Mason knows is crucial.
Oh, I see. So even a simple tool becomes this like multi-layered symbol.
Exactly. That square isn't just for building. It represents something way more abstract.
Yeah.
That mystic light that Masons talk about being given in the lodge. And Castells is very clear. This wasn't just a Masonic thing. He brings in Mosheim, who confirms this cross shape was used as a secret code for light by, get this, alchemists and Rosicrucians. Groups that, as Castells points out, had a lot of intellectual overlap with early Masons.
So practical tools get tied to spiritual concepts. That's fascinating.
Totally. And to really grasp it, you have to remember this light they're talking about. It wasn't just about, like, seeing in the dark. For all these groups, it was about knowledge, understanding their secrets. Light meant knowledge.
And that's where it gets even more interesting, because Castells then argues that all these Masonic ceremonies, they're built on a whole philosophy about God, a most high God who indwells the light and even is light himself. He even brings in Jupiter and Lustris, the Roman god, and of course the volume of the sacred law, as Masons call it.
He's laying a groundwork, the theological basis for how they see Freemasonry. God is light, and pursuing that light is how you get knowledge and understanding. It's a huge theme throughout the whole book.
And it goes even further, because Masons are taught to see God as not just everywhere and all-powerful, but also all-knowing, hence the all-seeing eye that, shows up everywhere. Castell says it's packed with meaning.
A world of meaning, he calls it, yeah.
And the idea is nothing can be hidden from God. And those who connect with God, they can even experience his light in the darkest times. So the question becomes, what is this light?
Right. It's clearly not just about, like, book smarts. It's got the spiritual side to it. Castells is saying, if you don't get that, you'll never understand what the Masonic Lodge is really all about.
He even steps back in time, saying this way of thinking about God and light, it links Masons to all the mystics and saints throughout history, as if the Masons are tackling the same big questions that great thinkers have always wrestled with. Pretty bold claim.
Well, he's trying to show that Masonic thought isn't just some random thing. It fits into this long, long tradition of seeking truth. Capital T, truth.
Okay, so then the book gets into this whole light and darkness thing, but in ancient mysteries, not just Masonry. He talks about the Pythagoreans, those disciples who stayed silent for 5 years, like a super intense apprenticeship. And their teachings were mostly spoken, not written down, and very closely guarded. Do you think he's trying to link that to how Masons are so secretive about some of their stuff? Like they have this sacred knowledge too?
It's more than just secrecy. Think about it. That silence, it was about focusing inward, preparing yourself before you could even handle the truth.
Yeah.
Like in Masonic initiation, the candidate starts not knowing, goes through a whole process, and then is brought to the light. It's about internalizing, not just being told stuff. That's a big part of being a Mason, that personal journey.
And then he talks about how in loads of ancient mystery initiations, the whole thing culminated in this big reveal, this illumination, like the Druids in Britain, stuck in the dark for 9 days, 3 times 3, or the Greek mysteries with their periods of darkness that could last, get this, 27 days, 3 times 9, like a whole lunar cycle.
So darkness is a stage you have to go through before you get to the light. like a separation from the world, a time of change, before you can be reborn with this new understanding.
Right. And Castells says this practice is why we have that metaphor, even today, of going from darkness into light. It's huge in Masonic ritual. And get this, the Greek mysteries even had an official guy called the photagogue, which literally means the bringer of light.
Wow, and don't forget the Persian initiations where they actually showed people divine lights. So it's all about this revealed truth. It's not just metaphorical, it's like experiential.
Yeah, okay, I get that. So then he ties this to stuff like the orders of chivalry, where knights would stay up all night before the altar before they got knighted. That accolade, the 3 strikes on the neck, very symbolic. Castell says today's lodge practices are basically modern versions of these old rites.
Totally. Think about it, that all-night vigil, it's like a purification, a commitment before you take on this new role. And those 3 strikes, they're probably about the challenges you overcome or the authority being given. He's connecting things across, like, centuries.
So are Masonic meetings at night supposed to remind us that we're still in darkness, even now?
I think so, especially with that motto, Lux Tenebris, light out of darkness. It's like Freemasonry's goal is to bring that light forward. And the symbols aren't just made up, they point to something real.
Okay, so preparation for initiation happens in a dark room. Makes sense. And then you come into the lodge and you can't see anything. Literally in darkness, he makes this comparison to a baby in the womb forming in darkness, then being born into the world.
Which is why they call it Mother Lodge. It's
Yeah.
like a second birth being born into Masonic understanding. The word mother takes on this whole new meaning.
Right, it's like where you start from. And the preparation, he says, it's like a secret process that's been happening in your heart for years, maybe even your whole life.
It's that inner readiness, that journey you go on before you can actually receive and understand the teachings. It's not just about the outer ceremony.
Makes you wonder, how conscious of it you are. Okay, so then he goes on about the evidence, or the value of the symbols. He says, Freemasonry is a peculiar system of morality. I like that phrase. Veiled in allegory and illustrated by symbols. He's saying basically everything in the rituals, even the little things, matter. They have meaning.
It shows how dense Masonic ritual is, right? Every action, every word, every object, it all potentially means something. You have to pay close attention and think hard to unlock it all.
He gives examples like the knocks, the steps, the signs and tokens, the words, all symbolic, even where people stand and the poses they strike.
And think about it, positions and poses, they're not random. They represent states of being, levels of understanding, different perspectives within the Masonic world.
Right, like a secret language. Then he talks about the tools, those have moral meanings too. And he even tells this story about being the first initiate in Manila. Freemasonry was actually a crime there back then, so they had to use fake names for secrecy, like his was Bro, Caesar. He says it's in line with the English rituals.
Having to be secretive like that, it really shows how important these symbols were. Fake names were protection, but they also, built this sense of belonging, like we're all in this together, in this secret society.
And he points out that even when the worshipful master and the warden say, pass so-and-so, those are symbolic names, different for each degree. He even remembers how they used to say bro, B, J, sh, or TC. And of course, in the 3rd degree, you act out the part of Hiram Abiff. And then there's the Royal Arch chapters, with their officers being Z, H, J, E, and N.
You become part of the story, the core of the craft, by taking on those identities, like stepping into their shoes, you learn the lessons they represent.
I get it. But he points out that while craft lodges don't usually give their officers these symbolic names, they do say that those 3 main officers, they represent the 3 Grand Masters from, building the first temple. Their names are actually in the ritual. And when Grand Lodge opens, the officers are asked, whom do you represent? And they have to answer, like they are B, J, H, A, or the Royal S.
It's constantly tying everything back to the foundation myths, the history, linking what they do now to that legendary past.
And then he makes this really interesting point. He says all this symbolic stuff, it's actually crucial for figuring out where Freemasonry came from, especially since there's not a lot of written records. Like the old exception in London, they barely kept any records at all.
So the symbols themselves become like a historical record.
Yeah.
Instead of writing it down, they encoded it in their practices and objects.
Exactly. He even says that the term accepted or speculative Masons, that's proof they came from that earlier group.
It's like their lineage is in their name. Fascinating how history can be hidden like that.
Oh, and there's this quote from a bro, weight that he uses. Weight basically says that if we want to learn more about Freemasonry, we shouldn't just look for regular historical evidence. We need to study the symbols, the rituals, the documents, all that.
It's a whole different way of looking at their history, right? Not just facts and dates, but interpreting the meaning embedded in their traditions.
Okay, so then he goes on to say we need to be careful how we interpret the symbols. That the goal is to make sure interpretations are consistent so we can link things to the past and prove Freemasonry is as old as it claims to be.
That consistency is all about building a coherent narrative, showing the roots and the core principles, you know.
And he warns us to be really careful with the ritual itself because the same words can mean different things and the same concepts can be presented in different ways, which can be confusing if you're not paying attention. And then, get this, he lays out 7 different ways of understanding what a lodge is.
Right, it's not just a building. The lodge is this multi-layered symbol. It operates on all these different levels.
Okay, so it's the actual building, obviously, but also it's a mystical version of King Solomon's temple with the worshipful master being like King Solomon. And the lodge is the fraternity itself with new members being like stones added to a building. And it's this universal mystic temple being built since the beginning of time on sacred ground. And then it's a representation of the whole universe, with God as the architect, obviously. And then it's an astral lodge based on the stars, a specific set of 7 stars, in fact. And finally, it's the Grand Lodge above, like in heaven.
It's mind-blowing how much is packed into that one word, lodge.
Right. Okay, so then there's this whole thing about the number 7 duplicator. He talks about the constellation Ursa Minor, the Little Dipper. 7 stars in that dipper shape, which ancient Masons saw as like the perfect lodge.
Yeah, the ideal form.
Right. But then he points to Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, also 7 stars, similar arrangement, but rotating around the same pole star, just in a bigger circle.
And the ancients definitely noticed this. Both those constellations dominating the sky. So Castells said the Little Dipper gave them the perfect lodge idea. But the Big Dipper, that taught them about following a greater power, the pulsar being like the supreme ruler.
Because it's consistent, always moving in that same way, like a lesson in obedience.
Exactly. And it also taught them about putting the eternal stuff above the temporary stuff, which is very characteristic of Masons.
Makes you wonder how much time they spent staring at the night sky, He also says they were really into astronomy, like considered it the most important of the 7 liberal arts and sciences.
Shows how deep their intellectual interest went. It wasn't just about the building, it was about the whole universe.
Right. Okay, so the Royal Arch chapter, which is like a higher level of Masonry, they talk about those 14 stars from both dippers, and they say those stars are a reflection of something else in their history. There's the story about 3 master masons sent from Babylon, and they find 14 pillars arranged in 7 pairs.
Oh, I remember this. And one pair was extra fancy, like the 2 brightest stars. And then the other 6 were all equally nice.
Exactly. So the 7 stars get doubled, and those 14 pillars, they represent both the lodge and then this other lodge, an emulation lodge, like nested inside each other symbolically.
It's like a fractal, the same pattern repeating at different levels.
And then it gets even crazier, because they find this 15th thing, like a pedestal or the base of a column, even more precious than the others. And it has these weird symbols carved on it, covered by a veil.
The big secret of the chapter, hidden under the veil.
Yeah.
Always got to have a veil.
Right. So then he brings it back to the stars, saying the pole star is central, everything revolves around it. And the mystics, they see that as a symbol too. Like there's an invisible point at the center of everything.
That's ultimate reality, the uncreated source of it all.
Right. And once a master mason understands that, that's when they get rid of all the, distractions and really become part of the mysteries.
It's like stripping away the superficial to see the core truth.
Okay, next up, he dives into the form, the site, and the fabric of the lodge. But he's very clear that he's not talking about actual blueprints. It's all metaphors, ancient figures of speech.
Right. It's symbolic architecture, not a construction manual.
So the form of the lodge, he says it's a parallelepipedon, basically a double cube.
2 cubes stacked on top of each other, yeah.
Right. But he says it's not literal. It's supposed to match the dimensions of the holy place in King Solomon's temple, from the Bible.
And it ties back to that rough ashlar becoming a perfect ashlar, that whole transformation thing. It's like you're being refined in the holy place.
I see. The double cube represents that. And he says that the symbol, it's not just craft masonry. It shows up again in the Royal Arch as the altar of incense, the place where the master mason finds what he's been looking for.
The altar, a symbol of devotion, of striving for something higher. He even brings in the Kabbalah here, that idea of Michael the archangel offering the souls of the righteous at the altar of incense.
Oh, wow. So their souls could ascend to God.
Right. And it's like the Mason wants his actions and words to ascend to, to the throne of grace.
Through good conduct and, following the right path, all that. Okay, so then the site of the lodge, it has to be a square and it has to be oriented east and west.
East and west being super important symbolically for like the rising and setting sun.
Yeah, he mentions that. And also the historical idea that learning came from the east and spread west. But there's a third reason, and this one's the big one. Masons have to build their temple like King Solomon's temple, which was itself built according to the pattern given to Moses, right?
On Mount Horeb, yep. Just like the tabernacle in the wilderness, it's all about following a divine blueprint.
And the first lodge ever mentioned in the explanation of that first tracing board, it was the first temple in Jerusalem. Duly oriented, so Masons of all time would know how to do it.
It sets the precedent, right? The original blueprint.
Right. Okay, then there's this section about the specifics of the mystical lodge, but he basically says it's so vast, no one person can fully grasp it all. There's no one place where it's all laid out.
It's like piecing together a puzzle from all these scattered hints in the ritual. You have to compare and contrast,
Yeah, and he warns us again, don't just take the words literally. They're hiding as much as they reveal, like a riddle. But he does say that the lodge is divided into 3 parts, just like King Solomon's temple. The porch, the holy place, which is a double square, and then the sanctum sanctorum, which is a perfect cube.
Which matches the 3 degrees. Initiation, the fellowcraft ordeal in the middle chamber, and then being raised to Master Mason, which is like entering the sanctum sanctorum. 3 stages of development, 3 parts of the temple.
And pretty much all ancient temples were divided like that. Okay, but for a closer look, he suggests we use a 7-fold division. The porch, the pillars, the pavement with its border, the middle chamber with the staircase, the central lamp, the dormer, and the grave.
It gives you a more detailed view, breaks it down into manageable chunks. Plus, 7 is a symbolic number, so it fits.
Of course. Okay, so going through the ritual, he picks out 15 specific things, all with meanings, like the porch, the pillars B and J, the point within a circle, the blazing star, and the winding staircase, just to name a few.
So much to unpack there. Each symbol is like a whole world in itself.
I know, right? Okay, so then he talks about the continuity of the degrees, like how the ground plan of Solomon's temple, it had these 3 rectangles, all the same width, but they made one big rectangle overall.
And his point is, even though the Masonic degrees are separate, with their own rituals and teachings, they're really all part of one continuous thing.
Like stages in a journey within the same temple, or, chapters in the same book, not totally separate compartments.
Right. And he says each degree has its secrets, but it's the same guy going through them. The lodge doesn't magically change into a new building with each degree. It's the same lodge, even though things might look a little different.
Right. Okay, but then he points out that lodges today don't always follow what he considers traditional Masonic history, like how the officers, they stay in the same places no matter which degree is being worked, which doesn't fit with the fellow craft ritual, where the wardens are supposed to be at the bottom and top of the winding staircase.
But things evolve, right? Practices change, interpretations shift. It's interesting to see how those discrepancies pop up.
Yeah, it's like seeing layers of history, how things have been adapted over time. He also points out this interesting language they use in the ritual, like the phrase, by level steps we hope to ascend. He's like, wait, how do you go up by level steps?
Right. It's clearly not literal. It's about moral and spiritual ascent, not climbing actual stairs. The square conduct being the means to achieve that.
It's almost like they're using language as a kind of like puzzle. You got to figure out the deeper meaning. And then he talks about how in the 3rd degree, the officers are actually in the grays, not on the stairs. They're acting out this whole drama.
Right. They play both the good guys and the bad guys from the story. It makes it so much more vivid than just reading it, right?
Totally. And his point is, everything's symbolic, and it changes meaning depending on which degree you're in. Even the titles, entered apprentice, fellow craft, master mason, they show where you are in your development.
Like stages in a journey, yeah?
Right. And he says the 3 degrees, they're like 3 chapters in a story about like the big mysteries of life, death, and resurrection. And what the symbols mean, it changes as you go through the story.
So you need all three to get the whole picture. It's
Yeah.
like you can't just read the last chapter and expect to understand the story.
Exactly. Okay, so he talks about how entered apprentices, they deal with the junior warden's ordeal to get through. Fellow crafts, they have the senior warden's trial before they can enter the middle chamber. And master masons, they're like symbolic kings and priests. They only answer to the Most High, which is why the worshipful master is their guide.
It lays out the hierarchy, the structure of the system, and how your understanding grows as you move up.
Right. And then he gets into all the specifics about where everyone stands their perspective, like the entered apprentice by pillar B facing east, seeing the sun, the literal sun, in the northeast, and the fellow craft by pillar J, looking southeast, having climbed the 5 steps of the mystical ladder, they get a wider view. They even glimpse the sacred symbol in the middle chamber.
But it's still limited, right? They're not at the center yet.
No, not yet. And he points out that inside the lodge, you don't actually see pillars B and J. You see their counterparts, the 2 grand parallels. They mark the north-south width of the lodge. They're like the diameter of that mystical circle.
Which has a center, a place where the Master Masons find that letter G. But the fellow crafts, they just see the point within the circle and the volume of the sacred law.
Right. So you have to reach Master Mason to get to the center, to see the whole thing and really explore it. And he says even as a fellow craft, you learn to put the names of the pillars together, B and J, and other things too, to figure out the meaning of the ritual.
It's like solving a code. You got to combine the clues.
And he mentions the perambulations, you know, how you walk around. They get more complex, too. First, it's 1 loop, then 2, then 3, encompassing the whole lodge. And all those shapes are nested inside each other, you know.
Always with that idea of the center, the point of origin.
Yeah. And those 3 ceremonies, they have specific points in them. And if you connect those points, you get the Seal of Solomon right there on the lodge floor.
2 triangles intertwined, right? One with its base at pillars B and J pointing to the east, and the other one flipped, base at the northeast and southeast, pointing west.
Exactly. And the Master Mason, he ends up standing right in the middle of that whole thing.
Yeah.
Where the light shines brightest.
The center of it all, where the real secrets are revealed.
Okay, so then the porch of the Master Mason. He says the Master Mason, he doesn't see the porch just as an entrance anymore. It's the entrance to the sanctum sanctorum.
Because he's ready now, he's gone through the steps, the purification, the trials. He's earned the right to enter.
Right. He explains that the holy place, which in the ritual is the middle chamber, that's what the Master Mason sees as the porch now. It's like a hallway leading to the real deal, the sanctum sanctorum. And he even talks about how when they open the lodge in the 3rd degree, the worshipful master asks the junior warden, "Whence come you?"
And the answer is the east, which makes sense if you think about the actual temple. The porch was on the east side.
Yeah, but most lodges, they have the door on the opposite side, the west. So how does that work?
Well, some lodges have the junior warden answer the west, specifically when asked as a Master Mason. It's like they acknowledge that their journey through the west, through European philosophy, didn't give them what they were looking for.
So they turn back to the east, like going back to the source.
Exactly. Back to that ineffable mystery of the dawn, the divine light. They've realized the West doesn't have all the answers.
But isn't that a bit backwards? The temple had the porch in the east and the sanctum sanctorum in the west. Now the lodge has the east as the most important, the place of light.
It's a symbolic reversal, right? In the lodge, they've put the most sacred place in the east. But they still use the old language of going to the sanctum sanctorum, which was originally west.
So they're mixing like Jewish and Gentile ideas.
Exactly, taking what they find useful from both.
Okay. And then he gets into the 3 entrances to King Solomon's temple, which are also in the ritual. The entered apprentice comes in by the southeast corner, by pillar B, and that's where he's acknowledged as a brother. The fellow craft comes in by the northeast corner, by pillar J, and becomes a craftsman. And then there were these guys called Menachin who came in through a special south entrance that was for the higher ranks because it led to the side chambers and the main temple.
So each entrance is like a different level of access depending on your rank.
Right. And he says that since Hiram Abiff was at the temple, it means he would have gone to the sanctum sanctorum. But he didn't go through the regular entrance. He went through the holy place, which is like how every Master Mason gets there, symbolically.
Like he had a special pass because of his role in building the temple.
Right. And then he talks about how Hiram tried to escape, First by the south entrance, then the north, but he was blocked. And finally, he went to the east entrance where he was killed. So he didn't go through the common porch. His porch was the holy place.
Makes you wonder what was going on in those side chambers, you know? Why was he trying to escape in the first place?
I know, right? Okay, so now we get to the twin pillars, B and J, which are, a big deal. But he says there's this debate about whether they were actually supporting the temple or just decoration.
Function versus symbolism, that's a constant theme.
And he points out that the pillars aren't even mentioned in the first degree. You only learn about pillar B, the left-hand pillar, which means there must be a right-hand pillar too, J, and maybe even more.
He's always hinting at the hidden depths, the stuff you haven't learned yet.
Yeah. And the worshipful master does say the lodge is supported by 3 pillars, so that foreshadows something. Okay, so then he says that those 2 pillars, they were at the entrance to the temple, which was common for a lot of ancient temples.
Yeah, like in Hierapolis, Tyre, Paphos, all those places. It's a very old symbol going back way before King Solomon.
And he brings up how classical writers, they thought the 2 mountains at the Straits of Gibraltar, those were like nature's own twin pillars, marking the entrance to the unseen world.
Oh yeah, the Pillars of Hercules, like a gateway to another realm.
Yeah.
And the Phoenicians, they even copied those pillars at their Temple of Hercules because they thought that was the edge of the world, the gateway to the unknown.
It's fascinating how these symbols travel, they pop up all over the place. But he says the Hebrews, they used these pillars in a specific way, a way that had moral meaning.
Right, they weren't just architectural features, like how the kings of Israel were anointed by Pillar B and the high priests by Pillar J. It even mentions in the Bible that the king stood by his pillar, like it was a common thing.
So in the Masonic ritual, B is linked to the king and J to the priest. But he says it's really important to remember that those names need to be thought of together, not just as separate things.
Like the 2 sides of a coin, both essential.
Right. And he says if you read the names together, they make a phrase. By him is strength, he will establish. It's a promise, a guarantee that everything will be okay, that the lodge is built on solid ground.
Trust in the higher power, the divine architect. That's a constant message.
So both entered apprentices and fellow crafts walk between the pillars, but the entered apprentice doesn't see them. He's still in darkness. The fellow craft, he sees them, but he doesn't understand them.
Not yet. It's second-degree stuff. And that's why those pillars get so much attention, so many books written about them. It's a key to understanding.
Okay, so then he talks about how B is supposed to be on the left, but in Solomon's temple, it was actually on the right. So how does that make sense?
It's about perspective. Remember, in the lodge, everything is flipped. The temple is turned around. And you're not outside looking in anymore, you're inside.
Ah, I see. So your left is still your left, no matter which way the temple is facing.
Exactly. And since the pillars were on the east side, J would have been at the northeast corner, which, if you're inside, is on your right. And the sanctum sanctorum was on the opposite end, the west. Got to keep all that straight. It's easy to get confused.
No kidding. So then he talks about how the Hebrews, they did their temple backwards, going east to west to get to